Hello and welcome to Eclectic Spacewalk Conversations. I'm your host, Nicholas McKay. Today we're joined by Stephanie Lepp. Stephanie is an executive producer at the Center for Humane Technology, where she leads the podcast Your Undivided Attention, hosted by Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin. Stephanie also runs Infinite Lunchbox, a studio for independent work with recent projects like Reckonings and Deep Reckonings. Welcome to Conversations, Stephanie.
Thank you, Nicholas. It's good to be here.
Thanks. So I guess the first question, where were you born? Where did everything start for you?
I was born actually not too far from where I'm sitting right now. I was born at Stanford Hospital in Palo
Okay.
Alto, and I
Yeah.
happen to live in Mountain View right now. And my son was born like right here.
Oh, wow. So Northern
Yeah.
California, Bay Area, born and bred. You love it. Still,
Born and
still must be
bred
there.
all over the Bay Area. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I lived in my parents are from Mexico and I lived there
Hmm.
for a little while with family. My husband is from New York and we lived there for a little while, but
Sure.
most of my life has been around the Bay Area.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I've done when I worked in Los Angeles at some marketing things. We had a bunch of things in the Bay, and even though I do like it up there, the Embarcadero, some clam chowder, the weather, though, I was always more poignant to Los Angeles and Southern California. But yeah, so neither
Totally.
here
Yeah.
nor there, you know. But so
Yeah.
wait, where were okay? So can you talk us a little bit about your earliest influences and specifically maybe like the realm of curiosity? What was, young Stephanie into? Was she reading a lot of books? What were you doing to kind of get a curious mind, if you will?
Young Stephanie, well, my my dad would say that young Stephanie was spending a lot of time in Stephanie Land.
Oh,
Was his name for it, was the place in which I still spend a lot of time there, in fact, maybe most of my time. Imagining, making up stories, making up
hmm.
all kinds of things. I had a little kind of cast of characters that I invented. I don't think I've ever talked about this publicly. Now
Okay.
everybody knows.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had a
yeah.
little cast of characters that I invented. The main one was named Freddie. And yeah, I was doing a lot of imagining, I guess I could say.
Yeah, yeah.
And I still am. So I guess that is a through line.
Yeah. So was
Yeah.
was there anyone, maybe I always kind of use this as a cliche example, but like an eccentric uncle that kind of pushed you in that direction? Or I mean, your dad was saying you spent a lot of Stephanie life, but was he encouraging of
Yeah.
that, et cetera? Or like
He
who was kind of
was,
pushing you?
yeah. I never had that uncle. I kind of wish I had. I always felt a little bit just, um, what do you like, the black swan? Is that the right metaphor? I
Hmm.
always felt a little bit kind of out of sync or something with the rest of
Sure.
my family. Um, so no, maybe I'll be that. I feel like I might be that eccentric aunt for someone. And I didn't have it. I
Boom.
kind of already am having a little bit of that relationship with my best friend from high school's son, who
Uh-huh.
has actually listened to an episode of Your Undivided Attention and it kind of blew his mind. So I might actually get to be the eccentric
Oh, that's
elder
very
that I
cool.
never had. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess like can we do just a quick kind of run through of maybe undergrad or school or like how you kind of, your journey up until being at the Center for Humane Technology. And then I guess maybe something in there I through the grapevine or some descriptions, you had some roots in mimetic meditation or mediation. So maybe talk us a little bit about
Oh,
that.
yes. Okay, let's see how to connect all the threads. Well, education wise or up until now. So I studied the same thing you're studying
Yep.
now, which is science, technology, and society, which is just a really wordy way of saying philosophy of science, philosophy of technology. I started in philosophy
Mm-hmm.
and but I went in because I wanted to create philosophy, right?
Okay.
Stephanie Land. I wanted to invent philosophy. I wanted to invent ways of understanding the
Right.
world and reality. And going into philosophy, you didn't really get to do that. You just study other people's. And
Mm-hmm.
not that I mean, and I respect and I want to study other people's, but I also wanted to invent my own. And
Mm-hmm.
so the way that the place to go to invent your own is a newer field of philosophy, and philosophy of technology is a little newer, and there's more to do. There's a lot to do, let's say, right now in that field.
Hmm.
And so that's how I ended up in that field. I'm trying to connect. What can I say? I mean, still some of my favorite frames or ways of thinking come from, I don't know if you've encountered Langdon Winter. Maybe I'll
Of
just like
course.
drop a little. Okay,
That's like
yeah,
catnip,
so
you know? Like
yeah, so and we still don't have, it's still not a like a broadly, it's like technology is neither inherently good nor bad, nor is it neutral.
Yep.
And so what is it?
Hmm.
Exactly. Good
Hmm.
question. We still often do a lot of in terms of technology, there's still a lot of technological determinism. Let's
Yep.
say technology is inherently X, and there's a lot of social determinism. Technology is neutral and it's just about us and what we do. It's like, no, there's actually often a more complicated picture, but that requires a more sophisticated understanding of what technology is. Anyway, I highly recommend, yeah, Langdon Winter, his chapter, which I'm sure you've read, "Do Artifacts Have Politics?"
Yep.
is a beautiful exploration of how artifacts have politics. But yeah, it's been a very curvy road, I guess I would say, from there to here. Although my closest colleague at the Center for Humane Technology, Tristan Harris, I did actually share. That was actually when we first met. We became friends probably over a decade ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
like
Okay.
instantly got very nerdy. And I did share Langdon Winter with him. We shared some thinkers back and forth. That was kind of the genesis of our relationship. So I guess there's a little bit of a line, maybe, even though
Yeah,
it's
for
somewhat
sure.
curvy.
Well, any
Um,
other, do you want to riff on any of the other things of maybe some like reflexivity or interdisciplinarity and those kind of like those are very catch-all STS terms and what you're describing, do artifacts have politics? I mean, that's one of the foundational kind of texts of any kind of science and technology studies that at least maybe it's not STS at first, but at the same time, like it's very, very much used as a framing, like you said.
yeah. Uh, um, like, are there other pieces that have stayed with me?
Hmm.
Um, Maybe actor network theory. I can't
Yeah,
say I
sure.
use it. I mean, I probably should. Um, I would love to kind of re-up, because then again, I'm going to date myself. It's been 20 years since I studied this material.
Oh, I got syllabuses
So,
for days for you, so don't worry about
maybe I'll have you
it.
assign me a couple things, because I'm sure the field has really evolved
Yeah, for
since my
sure.
time, and I can't say I've kept up with it. So, yeah, maybe I'll have you assign me a couple things, a couple of your favorite things from your
Perfect.
syllabus.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Okay. So I don't know, and you'll have to correct me if this was like your kind of description of yourself or someone else's, but quote, you are a producer whose work strives to hold up a mirror, inviting us to grow from what we see. So I thought that was super poignant, especially in our times. But then also it reminded me when I was researching this for the podcast, it reminded me of two other quotes that I found one from the poet Mary Oliver. So quote, I don't ask for the sight in front of me to change, only the depth of my seeing. And then
Oh,
yeah. But then on the opposite side, I guess you could say if it was only, back and forth of two extremes is the author of The Jungle, Upton Sinclair. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. So I just wanted to
mm-hmm.
maybe work, let's riff on that tension a little bit of inviting us to grow from what we see by holding up a mirror. I think that's super important, that goes into the reflexivity that we had just talked about with STS. But like, how do you see yourself as a producer and as a person trying to make change or impact, or do you at all? And then kind of riff on those kind of things.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. So the mirror is kind of the organizing principle that I use to understand and cohere my work. And maybe I would almost say it's, it's maybe more of a window that is very clean. So you can both see yourself and see forward and see
Uh-huh.
through.
Okay.
Um, I did actually at one point, also something I haven't really talked about publicly, send a mirror to someone. Not the best idea. Although he was a little he was a friend, but we were kind of in something. But it was a double-sided mirror, and so I kind of joke. And I
Ah,
wrote on the side that was less magnified. So if
mm-hmm.
anything, the more magnified side was pointing at me, saying, "You're the kind of person who just sends someone a mirror. What's up with that?"
Wow.
And I got the message. But as far as how it connects to my, yeah, I mean that's what I've learned over the course. So I produced a show for about 5 years called Reckonings that
Yep.
told the stories of how people change in all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of ways. People who expand their political worldviews, people who transcend violent extremism, recovery from addiction, all kinds of transformation. And so the common thread, and I went in with this question: how do people change?
Yeah.
How do people change in fundamental ways? I started kind of trying to research it online, but I didn't even really know what search term to Google. It's like, am I Googling worldview transformation? Is that even a thing? Like
Mm-hmm.
behavioral
Mm-hmm.
economics is out there, but I'm not looking to find out what makes people floss their teeth more often.
Yeah. Nudges
So this, and
abound. Yeah. Nudges everywhere.
nudges abound, but how do we fundamentally transform? And so, and I,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, the show certainly wasn't, a scientific investigation, but, I probably did over 200 hours or so of interviews with people who've made all kinds of change. And what I learned was that I had this kind of running list of things that I thought radically transformed people. So it's like falling
Mm-hmm.
in love, near death experience, psychedelics, sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes information, and very rarely because we usually only trust information that confirms what we already believe, per your Upton
Sure.
Sinclair quote. um, and yeah, what I found was that what those things do, it's not that those things make us change. What those things do, or what those things have in common, is that they reveal to us the difference between who we think we are and who we actually are,
Mm. Okay.
or the difference between the impact we think we're having on the world and the impact we're actually having on the world. And
Mm-hmm.
seeing that gap, that is what initiates the process of transformation. And I can give examples, but that's kind of where the mirror, it's like, I don't have to persuade, I don't have to like convince you or cajole you, or kind of like, it's like I can hold up a mirror, and granted, there are all kinds of mirrors and there are all kinds of ways of holding them.
Mm-hmm.
I can shove it in your face, I can send it to you in the mail, I can hold it up gently and give you room to just process it.
Right. Right.
There's fun house mirrors, there's not, so there's all kinds of, I mean, we can go down a whole rabbit hole in terms of that, but just the I was holding up a gentle mirror within the context of the show. I'm just asking you open-ended questions and just
Mm-hmm.
letting you, and some of these interviews were hours, and some of these people hadn't, I mean, if you're a former white supremacist, you've probably gone through therapy about that. You've
Right.
probably talked about that. But some of the people I talked to, the architect of Facebook's business model, who then realized he was addicted to his phone and has since devoted his life to tackling technology addiction. He didn't like go through therapy
Right.
about building Facebook's business model. So he's kind of processing this in real time with me in a quote unquote interview. It's called an interview, but it's really just kind of an opportunity to take a look in the mirror and just process
Yeah.
whatever is being seen. And so that is kind of the theory of change, let's say, that I came to, that I didn't have to like change people. I could just kind of create the conditions conducive to critical self-reflection and trust. And I'm not going to say that that's going to work in all circumstances, but it's a powerful tool. It
Yeah.
can work in many circumstances. And it's worth saying, maybe as a last note, that most, or if not all, and I haven't like researched this, but I think most wisdom traditions have that incorporated, right? Like there is a day, or there is a time, in Judaism, it's Yom Kippur. It's a whole day that is
Right.
devoted to reckoning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that is devoted to critical self-reflection, we could say. And so that is kind of like a part of spiritual development or human development.
That's very well
I
put.
just happened to do it within the context of an interview.
No, no, totally. And
Yeah.
just to kind of set the stage a little bit, so we mentioned in the description or the introduction, so you run Infinite Sandbox, which basically
I
produced the
like that too.
Reckonings.
Infinite Lunchbox.
Oh, I
I
love
like
it. I love that
Sandbox is
name.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So with Reckonings though, like I guess it would be cliched for me to ask you, maybe what was your favorite or memorable. I guess what would be more generative in this is maybe talk about one of the ones that maybe moved the most or the most reckoning, if you will, if that's even a term or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if someone was
Like
really
what was the
unsure.
biggest delta?
Exactly. Like what
Oh.
was one that kind of just jumps out at you?
Well, I mean, my mind is going in two directions. It's either what was the biggest delta in terms of where the person came from and went to, or what's the biggest delta in terms of when we started the interview
Oh,
and when we ended the interview.
okay.
Um,
Good point.
but the one, I mean, actually, the person that I just mentioned, the architect of Facebook's business model, I had to go back to him actually because
Mm,
we didn't really get it. This is so here. Okay, here's like a little behind the curtain for
okay.
folks that I don't think
Perfect.
this is, yeah, things that I haven't said publicly, but this is actually somewhat a little more interesting than like Stephanie having had a cast of characters when she was a little kid. So while I was interviewing him, he was also on in the cast of The Social Dilemma.
Yeah. We'll get to
Okay,
that. We'll
so
get to that.
okay,
Yeah.
so his name is Tim Kendall. He then went
Mm-hmm.
on to run Pinterest. So he was
Uh-huh.
and the fact that I was interviewing him and he was also being interviewed for The Social Dilemma at the same time, and I wasn't
Mm,
really getting the reckoning, and I had to go back to him again, and it was the second time when I got him, and I don't know if something had happened between the first time or the second time, or it
mm-hmm.
was in conversation with me, but it was the second time where he really came out and called out the structural constraints of capitalism,
Oh, wow.
which he said me even a year ago would be shocked
Oh,
to hear
right.
myself say
Yeah.
this.
For
He
sure.
said, and that actually there I don't know totally the order of operations. I would have to go back to him and ask, but he kind of had a reckoning in the process of his reckonings interview that fed into what he was then able to say on The Social Dilemma,
Oh, wow.
actually. Yeah. Because and for folks, I guess so The Social Dilemma is a Netflix documentary that's all about how our brains are being hijacked by social media, how our consciousness is being hijacked by social media. But there are kind of two parts of the film. The first part of the film really goes into our social media predicament, what social media is doing to us. The second half of the film is really going into the broader economic and political context in which these technology companies exist,
Mm-hmm.
right? That prevent them from doing anything other than, let's say, holding themselves accountable to short-term profit maximization, right? If we want these companies to do anything else, we need to zoom out, right? And
Yeah.
look at the political and economic context in which they exist. And it was, and something, so I guess, Tim's Delta, it's like, like me going back to him and being like, we need more here, somehow fed into him being able to kind of like speak to that second half of the film in The Social Dilemma.
Well, putting up good mirrors,
Yeah.
Stephanie. That's good. Now, and we'll
They
definitely
work.
get
They work.
yeah, we'll definitely get into the social dilemma because I want to talk a little bit broader and incisively and longer, I guess. So Reckoning's huge transformation of people, who have made these changes. But then secondly, you had also a award-winning, a Webby award-winning series called Deep Reckonings. When you originally made this, I think I had stumbled across this like years and years back. So just to kind of give
Oh.
a little bit of people some context is deep fakes is when you kind of like take a video and then take like either a person's actor or a face and then put it over someone like a figure. So like what Stephanie did was basically make fake videos that imagine quote morally courageous versions of our moral figures. So what if Mark Zuckerberg basically had a reckoning? What if Judge Brett Kavanaugh, and I think Brett Kavanaugh was the one that went during his or after the Supreme Court, nomination, et cetera. And then Alex Jones having a reckoning that I saw. So, I mean, who would be kind of your, first off, I guess, talk a little bit about that and what that process was like. And then maybe who now would be your most wanted figure to do like an update? Because there's many choices. I mean,
it's endless. It's endless. Yeah. And I should also say, I mean, it's easy to kind of misunderstand this project or the spirit of this project, and it was very misunderstood. A lot of people thought it was satire.
Okay.
And if you read the script or like headlines of articles that were written about it, is like, so and so like grovels in their apology. It's like a groveling apology to me is not even interesting. It's like,
right.
it's too easy, actually.
Right,
the challenge I gave myself, and this might sound completely absurd, but is, can I make something that would not alienate the person that it is of? And granted, putting words in someone's mouth is inherently alienating, and still, the creative challenge I gave myself, the brief I gave myself was, can I make something that would both not alienate the person and not alienate their critics? And maybe that's a non-existent overlap in a Venn diagram, but I'm still trying to carve it out. How can I steel man their crisis of conscience? I'm also not this doesn't have to be also like bad guys. Like the prototype I did was of the Pope reckoning with the clergy sex abuse crisis. And I mean, I could do myself. I mean, it's like anyone. It's like, how might I imagine? I mean, the tagline, the question that I'm exploring, there's many, obviously, epistemological, technological, ethical implications, but the overarching question of the project is, how might we use our synthetic selves to elicit our better angels? I mean, you could easily do one of yourself, the you that you want to be, in order to inspire you to be that self. My husband happens to be in addiction medicine. You could easily, you could imagine working with your patient to script a deep fake of their sober self in the future, talking to themselves now.
Oh, wow.
Encouraging themselves onto the path of recovery. So this is the conjuring, eliciting our best selves. It's not like only applied to bad guys who need to apologize. And
very cool.
And I guess the other thing I'll say is how do I know what a reckoning sounds like? Well, I spent X years interviewing people who'd had, so that's really the source material for me. I'm not just kind of like, well, what do I wish Kavanaugh would say? It's like, well, what does a reckoning even sound like? And so in writing the scripts, one of the questions I asked myself was, if this person had some kind of a crisis of conscience, what wisdom would they come to that could teach all of us, right? All of my guests, it's not just the apology. I mean, yes, sometimes there's an apology or a taking of responsibility, but always there's some wisdom there's some insight that is arrived at. So for me, an apology kind of wouldn't be enough. And that would also be like, okay, for the critics, but like, what is come to as a result of realizing that I have something to take responsibility for? So for Kavanaugh, let's say, just as an example, to kind of make it real, one of the things he says, his is my favorite. So if people are going to watch one, or if you're going to insert one or something.
Yeah, I'll definitely
I think his is
the most, at least.
His is my favorite because I think it's the most successful, because I think it actually carved out, let's say, the space in that Venn diagram better than the others. And he says, the imaginary Kavanaugh says, evolution is beautiful, but it's not pretty.
Oh,
he says, for all of the men who are getting caught in the crossfire, and I might be one of them, or, it's like for people who are maybe getting caught in this, evolution is beautiful, but it's not pretty. There are people who are maybe getting caught in this process that we're going through, but there is a bigger process of social progress that I want to really celebrate and support. And so, yeah, evolution is beautiful. Thank God we are evolving the way that we treat women in this country. Thank God. I'm so grateful for that. And sometimes it's not pretty, and sometimes it's messy. And guess what? I'm a man of power and privilege, and I can actually play my part to support, so it can be a little prettier, and allow it to be the beautiful evolution that it is. So Yeah. So yeah, I guess just to say, yeah, this is not satire.
No, no. That I think
And
that's
the
an
and
important distinction, because I think maybe people would have maybe thought that or saw a headline. So I appreciate you kind of distilling that.
yeah, and the scripts that I mean, it's a really fun challenge. They were really hard to write. I mean,
Hmm.
I was nervous to try to write a script for Alex Jones. It's like, do I
Right.
want to go into the heart of Alex Jones? And the reason that's scary is not even because like, oh, I'm going to discover that he's actually evil. It's like, no, because I'm going to discover that he's actually human.
Oh, right,
That's the
right. Yeah,
scary
yeah.
thing. It's like,
Yes.
wait, and yeah,
Good
and
point.
actually his was actually way easier to write than I would have thought. I actually found it was easier to find it, like, because I don't know how much you've listened to him speak, but he's suffering, and it's like you can hear it in his conversations with Joe Rogan. I
Sure.
found it easier to kind of like find him, I guess, than to find Zuckerberg. Yeah.
So who's on the list? So if you could,
Oh,
do one
now?
right
Oh, it's
now,
endless. Just
endless.
follow the news cycle, literally. Like the
Yeah.
news cycle it's constant.
Right.
But yeah, the obvious one lately is Putin, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the way to make it clear that it's fictional is just have a dialogue between Putin and Jesus. And you don't have to say it's fake, then you just really, and
Yeah. I mean,
it's Putin's reckoning and hmm,
I would put Musk up there. Obviously, I'd put Musk up there. That would be interesting. Or even like even taking someone like J.K. Rowling, like of her things like with trans issues and stuff. And but like you said, there's endless kind of extensions of kind of going through reckonings and then having them. But I love what you said about them being human.
yeah.
Like going through that process
Yeah.
is way more interesting, I think, to find that they're human rather than some fictionalized myth character of good or evil. I think that's
Yeah, and that stuff is already out there. That stuff
yeah.
has already been done. You're actually though kind of making me think that this is maybe I should actually retitle it, and it's something like, because for Musk and J.K. Rowling, for example, it's almost more like evolved crisis management. It's like it's like here's the thing that you could say that would help us all out.
Right, right. Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
like anybody needs that. Everybody needs that, like especially
Hmm.
at peak cancellation moment. Like it's like, what is the thing that you could say? It's not that, yeah, it's like, it's not that you're like a bad guy or something. It's just that like you have the mic. And if you used it with like a tiny bit more grace, which I understand it's hard to do when a lot of people are beating up on you, but if you could like rise to the occasion a little bit and hear some words to help
Right,
inspire you, then
right.
that would be really helpful for all of us.
Well,
So it's
okay.
more like you use your mic wisely. Here,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, well then, I mean, I would implore you to maybe look at some of those other options and continue it, because I think in
Musk and Rowling.
2000, or no, just in general, because 2022 is begging for some of the more
Oh
of these
yeah,
deep
no, well
fakes, because it's
the
been a minute,
dream way
right?
to do it, the way that I
2015.
would want to do it, the is to make it and then send it to the person and be like, you do the real thing or we'll release the fake one.
Oh,
Like if you want to do
hilarious.
the real thing, I'll help you do the real thing, like
Yeah.
listen to the entire Reckonings catalog. I'll help you do and if you're not ready for that, then deep fake it till we make it.
Oh man, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so I guess then now that we're finished with infinite lunchbox, infinite sandbox, etc., I guess you could say whichever one we want to. So sorry about that
I like
earlier.
both. I like both.
Yeah,
No worries.
but I guess the last question of that is like through these projects, I bet they obviously blood, sweat, and tears. A lot of time. Reckoning with yourself, like doing projects and stuff like that. What is maybe what has changed the most from yourself personally, or what have you learned the most from it yourself, from doing that, like these kind of like independent kind of things on the side? And obviously we'll get into the center of humane technology, so maybe these other independent projects, like what have you learned yourself the most? I mean, has there been?
What have I learned? I mean, I could kind of go high or go low.
We want it all,
Low,
Stephanie. We want it
want it
all.
all. Okay, low that I've learned, and this is not totally new, but that I live in a semi-permanent state of creative anguish because there are
Okay,
way too many things that I want to make than I could possibly make.
you're a real creator,
So
Stephanie, though. That's good.
I'm a
That's good.
tortured artist. I really am. That's and like I can say that I mean my best friend from high school calls me that. And there's actually some relief that comes with that because there's kind of an archetype. It's like there's a long history of this. I'm not alone.
I'm with you. Hi. Yeah. Yeah. We're
Okay,
together
hi,
in
good.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah, I've actually thought of like making a support group, an ideator support group. So maybe, yeah, because sometimes just talking about just like saying the ideas if I don't get to make them can actually be a source of
Totally.
relief. So
Yep.
if you want
Yep.
in,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
maybe. Okay, okay, cool. So so if I go high, what have I learned? I mean, just because I have reckonings on the mind, it's kind of the same. It's the same lesson over and over again. I keep thinking the I find the human in there. I mean, I keep thinking like,
Mm,
oh no way, this episode. I was not looking for this episode, and an episode ended up in my lap that is a former priest. Okay, so
wow.
clergy sex abuse, which for me it's like no way, no. There, how could this ever like? There is no way that there is like a human being in
Right.
here,
Right.
right? Or
Right.
that there's any kind of like understanding of why this person did what they did. And this would happen to me every time.
Yeah.
Um, and then you go in there and it's like, oh, wow, there's a story here. I mean, this is an episode. It's a it's a priest. It's a former priest who was convicted and accused and convicted and spent time in jail.
Hmm.
And it's him and a woman who was abused by her nun, and they now are collaborating to bring restorative justice to the Catholic Church. So
Wow.
it's their
Okay.
story.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a wild story.
Okay.
And yeah, but it's like it was just kind of that same lesson over and over again with each time was like, am I really going to do this? Am I really going to interview this person? I mean, it's not live, so I don't have to air it. But yeah, and every time I would just go in there and find, and there's some people I guess I should say that I would never that are just off the table for me. Let's say
Hmm.
for deep reckonings that I don't even want to, I actually do not want to find the human being inside of Assad or
Oh,
inside of
sure.
MBS. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not even interested in that. And
Yeah.
call that a boundary. That's fine. I'm fine. I'm aware of that boundary and I will keep that there, at least for now. But but yeah, there are others that maybe I kind of had there and was like, am I actually going to be able to move this boundary or dissolve this boundary or play with this boundary? And it surprised me every time.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm definitely in support of the tortured artists, chat group that we're going to start, and then also
Okay.
putting up some boundaries. Even though you may find nuggets of humanity or stuff, there is use to put up some boundaries of sorts. So I do
Yeah,
like
the way
that.
I say it is I'm so open-minded, I'm even open to being closed-minded sometimes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well said. So I guess moving on to like your position. So you're an executive producer for at the Center for Humane Technology. So I guess first off, like very top level, like what is the mission? Why is it important? And then I guess at the end of that, how involved in the social dilemma documentary were you, et cetera?
Oh, I was not there yet, not involved.
Not involved.
Although
Okay.
friends of the team,
Sure, sure,
and
sure.
and Deep Reckonings and Social Dilemma and my son were all born like kind of at the same time.
Oh, wow.
So
Packed in.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
it was the wild, it was September 2020. I don't know if you remember. It was heat waves, California heat waves, fires, the sky was red, pandemic. It was like
Oh,
this
sure,
very,
sure.
and then like the social dilemma comes out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
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 So, but yeah, the Center for Humane Technology, broadly speaking, is working to, yeah, just maintain the integrity of human consciousness and attention from the onslaught of social media that is racing us to the bottom of our brain stems. And we operate in the realms of
Mm-hmm.
education, public education, and policy
Mm-hmm.
would be kind of like and so we have a we education wise we have a podcast which I lead, which is called Your Undivided Attention. We have a course for training technologists.
Mm-hmm.
um Tristan, I mean, people on the team are constantly speaking and teaching. So we kind of have the education side of things, and then policy wise. Um, I'm wondering kind of like what I can
Well,
say
we'll get
publicly.
into
Just,
we'll get into the
yeah.
podcast, and so maybe just focus
Okay.
on maybe the one of the
Yeah.
policy stuff. So like how so the
Yeah.
course is super interesting, training technologists, the podcast in general, but then I guess policy. I mean, that's a huge, I guess you could say, topic of consideration nowadays with so much of like the influx of not just money in politics, but then also institutions trying to change
Hmm.
narratives, et cetera. So like maybe just quick liner about what you guys see as policy and how to drive change in that kind of regard.
I mean, I'll say more, maybe I'll just say something about there's there's a window of opportunity, right? There are these moments, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
say
Mm-hmm.
after the social dilemma came out. After the social dilemma came out, Tristan testified before Congress, not for his first time, but Lindsey Graham referenced the social dilemma. Actually,
Right.
it wasn't when, actually, it was when, sorry, it was when Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey were testifying
Okay.
before
Okay.
Congress. And Lindsey Graham
Uh-huh.
was like, have you seen the social dilemma? So there are these moments, right, when there's a window of opportunity for political change. And tech is this like wildly rare bipartisan issue when like nothing is bipartisan anymore. Tech
Yeah.
somehow still, even though they would have different approaches to the issue, it's an issue that is very bipartisan, right? And so the window of opportunity we're in right now is the post Francis
Yeah. Yeah.
Haugen window of opportunity. So for folks who don't, so for folks who don't know, Frances Haugen was at Facebook and it was is a whistleblower. Facebook
Yep.
kind of had social media had its quote unquote big tobacco moment last fall, and we interviewed her on the show, and she's absolutely brilliant. And so we're kind of living in and she leaked a lot of really kind of extraordinary information about how much Facebook knows about the impact
Yeah.
it's having. So in that
Yep.
case, the mirror does not work, right? Because Facebook is hyper aware. It
Yep.
tracks the
Yep.
impact it's having. And yet, but this is when we also have to zoom out and, the mirror is not, uh, what's the saying? Sufficient, but not sufficient.
No.
Necessary, but not sufficient. Necessary,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
not
Necessary,
sufficient.
very much. Okay.
Because
Yeah.
if Facebook is still held accountable to short-term profit maximization, well, then we need to go a little bit upstream of the
Yeah.
company itself. Um, but yeah, so there's a window of opportunity, I guess I would say, still kind of in the afterglow of Frances Haugen's revelations.
Okay. And then so I mean, and this don't take this as too much of a push, but I do want to kind of maybe go a little higher level and like the STSE kind of things because so
Oh
at least
yeah.
for me, like watching the documentary, I watched it the first time with my girlfriend, and we, we're nerds and et cetera, but love kind of these exposés and different kind of filmmaking, to kind of try and tell a story, and we really liked it. But then I really started thinking a little bit more about how they went about it in that, like, well, I guess my critique of it was that they were kind of interviewing the same people that kind of who created the problem and that how it can
Yep.
be fixed rather than like
Yeah.
maybe going and there's a panoply of scholars, of researchers, of people who maybe could have had a more of a voice. And like, I just remember for one review that I had to look it up to do this. So these aren't my words, but a film that manipulates you with misinformation as it tries to warn you of manipulation by
Oh,
and misinformation. And it's like, eesh.
yikes.
So for
Yeah.
me, but since you weren't kind of really involved and maybe you were just viewing it, but then also you work at kind of the Center for Humane Technology, I really liked the film overall in its message and what it was trying to do. But then maybe if we were kind of to critique it a little bit and maybe if you could remake the social dilemma now, like is there anything that you would say? Because I think like you just said, there are
Yes.
these Overton windows that kind of
Yeah.
move and shift, et cetera. So maybe just from your point of view, like we can just kind of talk a little bit about the
Yeah.
criticism and what we could do maybe nowadays
Yeah.
with a little bit more hindsight.
Yeah, totally. Yes. And I'm happy to, and even if I had worked on it, I would still welcome
You
critiques. And
seem like the
but yeah,
person
the
that
two,
would.
I mean, the two kind of main, I guess, critique, like for me, it's fine if they interviewed the people who created the problem, but then the role
Mm-hmm.
of those people should be to take responsibility for creating the problem, right?
Yeah, good point.
Reckonings, deep reckonings. So to me, the glaring omission, it's like, the critique is like, oh, but it's all white guys who created the problem. It's like, Yeah, because their role is to take responsibility for the problem they created. They just kind of skipped a step. It was like, I was there, I built it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
are you gonna say, is there gonna be a, and I fucked up? Like, is there gonna be
Right.
like, it's like they missed a step or something. So
Hmm.
that's the role. It's not, it's like, to me, it's not a problem if they have those people, if those people are doing the role that they're uniquely equipped to do, which is
Hmm.
take some responsibility, which would have been so also like culturally therapeutic. I think it would have been really helpful. I think the critique, like, then it wouldn't, you know, right? We wouldn't be critiquing them for having the creators of the problem if they had taken responsibility
Yeah,
for creating
sure.
it's like
Yeah.
that only them can do that.
Right, right,
So
right, right, right.
if we want to talk about solutions, then yeah, then there's like a whole nother cast of people. Yeah, and that's also a very common critique of the film that I also agree with. But I'm kind of two minds about. I'm no, I yeah, there could definitely have been more solution orientedness, for sure. I think yeah, this was much more like a diagnosis. So but that also that kind of goes more to the goal, like what is the goal of the film? What was the film
100%.
trying to achieve?
Yep.
And if the film was trying to expose the problem and kind of like rally people around, I think it did that very well.
Hmm.
I get, yeah, the two things I would, so just leaving the solution oriented aside, I would say if your goal was to just expose the problem, then I would say have the people who created the problem take responsibility. And then I would say second, I don't think the bridge was built very effectively from the first half of the film to the second half of the film. The second half of the film really does focus on the economic context in which these companies exist. There's the line that Justin Rosenstein says that a tree is worth more dead than alive.
Oh, sure. Oof.
And that's part of
Oof.
the problem. People forget, like, people still, when they talk to us about the film or talk to Tristan about the film, like, the first thing they say is, like, oh, like, my kid is addicted. Or, like, oh, I really struggle. It's like, I think we got the memo. We got the memo about the first half of the film, kind of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
only. And
Yeah.
so I'm not sure what I maybe start with the second half, maybe start with the context, start with like, this is the economic context, or this is however far you want to go upstream. If you want to go out all the way up to the generator functions of existential risk, fine. If you want to go all the way up to rival risk dynamics, multipolar traps, arms races, I mean, we should go further upstream than capitalism anyway. But like, if you wherever you want to kind of locate the source, maybe that's the place to start. And then technology just becomes yet another manifestation of that. But at least we've
100%.
appropriately contextualized it in a way that people will remember. It starts all the way up there. So we can't only point the finger at tech companies. We need to point the finger at, sure, the shareholder value myth and all the way up.
Lots of mirrors.
And when you go
Lots of
when you go
mirrors.
all the way up there, yeah, when you go all the way up there, you also get to just our human nature. I mean,
Yeah.
you get to like some other, so yeah, those
No,
are the
I'm
two. If yeah.
I'm with you on that. And
Yeah.
honestly, like if we really take it into the context of like, okay, does it like instill some type of zeitgeist movement, are more people understanding what the problem is, et cetera? I think it did succeed in that. And I guess the only other film that we can talk about, and maybe this will be a short film review of some of these things, is Don't Look Up, because with the climate
Mm,
change, because I mean, it's so funny because when I watched it at first, I was like, this is, there's comedic elements, there's a different narrative. It really kind of changes the thing. But then everyone is so off on like, well, it's treating viewers like they're dumb, and it's like, well, but that's the whole, I mean, there's an element that they're trying to do. But I think as a film, like if you change or at least influence the zeitgeist to talk more about the issue, I think in a lot of different ways that is a success. And so I don't know if you have any connections with like Don't Look Up and that kind of like same
yeah.
thing. But that's the other film that I thought of in the sense of like
Yeah.
really, at the social dilemma level, if you will.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed. I had so many thoughts after I watched it and I've already kind of forgotten. So can you give me, and you can cut this out if you want. I'm sorry. I have
No,
a
no,
full-time
no.
job, two kids. My brain is full. Can you remind me a little bit of like how it resolves, how it ends?
No, I'm pretty sure that if, and again, like I'm dating myself of watching the movie, but I'm pretty sure that the asteroid like kills everybody. like at the end. So like, I mean, I can look up
And the
quickly.
mom takes off and forgets her son in the
Yeah.
wasteland. Yeah.
So I mean, it
What
all ends
happens to
up
the sign?
badly.
What happens to Leonardo DiCaprio? What happens to the protagonist and Jennifer Lawrence? What happens to them?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, I thought that I'm reminded that I thought that they all went to like a house and were having like a dinner or something.
Oh, and
Maybe
they were
they
just
were just writing it
ritualizing it.
out. Yeah, yeah,
They
like this is
yeah,
happening. Like this is, and that's what I
our
remember.
last supper. They had their
Yeah.
last supper.
And the
Yeah, yeah.
reason why I'm
Uh,
bringing this up is recently, with all the heat waves and the climate action and all the rest of it, people are like taking news clips of actual news clips and then putting them with don't
totally,
look
and
up clips.
comparing them.
And I'm like,
Oh yeah,
oh
yeah.
man, this is hilarious. Like, are we in an
Yeah.
actual film ourselves? So I didn't know if you had
So
any
here,
thoughts, not
yeah.
to.
My general, and I don't know if this is so specific. My kind of a more general thought that I probably thought in reaction to Don't Look Up. When it comes to things that are prophesizing,
Mm,
um, we are not just talking about the future at a high enough level of influence. We're not just talking about the future, we are creating it.
oh, totally.
We are
100%.
co-creating it. And
Yep.
so when it comes to prophecies, I just especially, it's like take responsibility for your co-creation of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are
Mm-hmm.
you seeding? What are you
Mm-hmm.
seeding into the collective consciousness in terms of what we get to? I mean, we have always, throughout history, we have always co-evolved with the stories that we tell about ourselves and the future, whether fictional or non, right? And
Yep.
so I probably just thought, like, come on, give us something to co-evolve with here. Like, I get, and maybe they would say, yeah, but it's a funny mirror. We're supposed to look at it and laugh at
Mm-hmm.
ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's maybe also why I say, yeah, but the mirror is also a little see-through. We're also looking through it.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, someone who I would say takes responsibility for their co-creation of reality, I would say Kim Stanley Robinson.
Okay. Okay.
If you read Ministry for the Future,
I
he's a
did.
science fiction writer.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it
Yeah, and
actually. Yeah.
he does a really nice job of threat of like not like he fully um exposes the gravity of what is likely to happen, the darkness that we are going through and might go through, and also kind of like rolls out a red carpet. I mean, and that's also very deep reckonings, right? How might we use our
Mm-hmm.
synthetic selves to elicit our better angels? Like, what kind of carpet are you rolling out? And so maybe with Don't Look Up, there's some of it that it's like making fun of us can. I mean, I find value in making fun of ourselves for sure, and also, and towards what end, and in service of what, and like rolling out the red carpet in what direction. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm with you on some of this stuff because to be quite honest, sort of right now I'm actually almost done with the first book of the Mars trilogy, so Red Mars, and it's
Oh,
super interesting, like how politics and socioeconomic status and the narratives and everything just comes in. I really liked Ministry of the Future, but then also I guess I maybe want to riff with you now a little bit on you just mentioned kind of the narratives we tell ourselves. I mean, in science fiction has perennially been about like the dystopia realities that we're about to reckon with, et cetera, until a couple years ago with a little book called from Ted Chiang, Arrival. And I really enjoyed Arrival and like kind of more of a maybe not utopic vision, but more of a kind of way out, if you will, or something that can
mm-hmm.
be to used, as something to go towards. And so I don't know if you're familiar with those, but like Arrival, one of my favorite, sci-fi movies of the last say 10 years, and because
Oh,
it doesn't go to this like whole dystopic reality that we're unfolding. It actually gives us some memorable, like I would dare say optimistic visions of
yeah,
humanity, etc. So if you haven't
yeah.
checked that out, I would
Oh,
definitely
I will.
the
I will.
Arrival.
And I mean, I should also say, like, disaster porn, like, has a role. Like,
Yeah,
it's
for
not
sure.
inherent. It's like disaster porn can be a gateway to action,
Sure.
so it's
Sure.
just like under what circumstances, in what quantities, in what, it's like when in service, thumbs up, and that there's like a needle to be thread. because it can be in service and it can also just be totally devastating and depressing and make us want to just tune out.
Yeah, that's great.
So
That's great.
info hazard wise.
Okay, so let's maybe pivot in and go a little deeper into your undivided attention. So, quote, the podcast explores the incredible power that technology has over our lives and how we can use it to catalyze a human future. We talked a little bit about that, and I really liked your episodes with Daniel Schmachtenberger, Tim Wu, the lawyer from Harvard, who kind of goes, or at least is a little bit more real about the code as law kind of movement. And then Kate Raworth with Donut Economics. Really, love those episodes. But then you mentioned the two infamous whistleblowers, Frances Haugen and Sophia Zhang. So again, like really, interesting people. And these are the only ones that I kind of saw from either my own self or researching. So maybe what have you, again, like learned most from, putting on the podcast, or maybe what is something you didn't expect? And one of the things that the name of my ebook is Tripping Over the Truth. So how do we kind of like, trip over our own biases and like cultural kind of framings, et cetera. So like, can you talk a little bit of maybe some truths that you have tripped over, not just as you as an executive producer, but you as a human, an individual, but then maybe, Tristan or, some of the other
Asia.
guests, et cetera.
Yeah.
Asia. Yeah. Asia.
What do you mean tripping over the truth?
Okay, so there's an interesting story in like say India in like 2002. This is just the story of it when they were trying to put in like plumbing, like outdoor, because there's a lot of people who just like defecate like out in the fields and stuff, and so there was a big cultural pushback. So once they put all the plumbing in, no one was using it, and they're like, well, how do we kind of get this, these people to do this? And so basically what they did was they brought in some psychologists or whatever, and they had one of them said, bring me around to where you guys go use the restroom. And everybody's like, no, we don't want to go over there, et cetera. And then so they finally go over there, and he basically had a cup of water and took a hair and put it in some stool and basically put it in the water and then swirled it around and asked people, would you drink this? And they're like, no. But then basically he asked, well, don't you guys like eat with your hands with flies? And he's like, basically the connection was that the flies that were on their stool were now on their food. And so they were effectively doing the same thing that they didn't want to drink the water with the stool in it, but they're eating stuff with the stool possibly. So the whole story is that there was a light bulb moment of this community that they like tripped over their truths that they had like always done or whatever. And so there was some pushback, obviously, because that's kind of like forced and et cetera. But then also like there was a real decrease in like child mortality stuff, like just basic disease things and immunology. So there was a story and that basically that was what prompted me to come up with the kind of thing of they tripped over their truths. So it was a super interesting kind of thing. And so now I've been using that as almost like another framing of like your deep reckonings of like, well, what are the truths that, are around us that we're not tripping over? But then how do we also manufacture tripping over them in generative ways, and so that's kind of so are there any kind of things going through the podcast and making, your undivided attention, like what truths maybe you thought from before, your own reckonings, going through the podcast, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the main, I don't know if this is like a truth that we are tripping over or like should trip over, but it's the bigger frame, the what I was saying about the social dilemma that it didn't quite build the bridge. That's also that's also kind of a challenge on the show, where we want to contextualize everything we're talking about within this bigger context of, I mean, to use Daniel Schmachtenberger's term, since you just brought him up, he would call it the generator functions of existential risk. And yet we don't always appropriately do that. And partly it's because we're kind of learning, and partly it's because maybe we're nervous that if we zoom all the way out like that, we'll lose our audience, because our audience is like wants to know about tech. And this is obviously the context in which tech lives. But so that's kind of a bit of a growth opportunity for, it's just something we're kind of learning how to do. And a part of it, I would say, is is not being scared to, or I don't know if it's fear, but to kind of like, I don't know how this is gonna sound, might sound patronizing, but like also teach the guests or like invite guests into the bigger frame. Like Tristan and Asa are, experts in their own right. And the guests are bringing some kind of expertise, but I'm always encouraging them to be reciprocal. Like if
Mm.
the guests are bringing us something, like we can bring them something too.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it
Mm-hmm.
be great if we all walked away from a quote unquote interview, with our minds expanded? So even if the guest is not whatever, like speaking in terms of the bigger, whatever it is, like we can do that with them. That doesn't mean anything other than, we're all in the business of educating each other all the time. So, yeah,
Well, I
that's,
appreciate the
yeah,
honesty. I mean, that's really cool.
yeah.
It really kind of threads the needle of I guess taking some learnings from other things and then maybe being reflexive about it on your own. So I really appreciate it. But again, your Undivided Attention is the podcast, and I'll obviously put it in the show notes and stuff. So okay, a couple more questions. So on the Doomer Optimism podcast, you spoke with
Mm.
Ashley and Jason about not necessarily having one humongous tent of like-minded individuals, but possibly a constellation of different interests and wormholing from one of them to another. So I thought that was super interesting, super generative. And I guess, can you just talk a little bit more about some of those things? Because we talked a little bit about boundaries, and you can't just throw all boundaries to the wayside, but are like thresholds useful to call out, or really just kind of distractions from momentum? And how do you really kind of create some of those kind of wormholes between like-minded groups? Is it narratives? Is it organization? Any thoughts on that you can kind of expand on?
Sure. I guess there's maybe two ways that I would approach that. One is wormholes between different echo chambers or between different tribes. I mean, that's where mimetic mediation comes in, and that's not my term. That's a term that I think Jason developed together with Peter Limberg, who's the steward of the
Yeah,
Stoa.
the Stoa.
And the Stoa is amazing, and I highly recommend checking out the Stoa.
For
But
sure.
the concept of mimetic mediation is it's mediating between different mimetic tribes, let's
Yep.
say. And you can even just think about your own Thanksgiving dinner table. So at Thanksgiving, you're
Contentious
probably at the
area.
intersection. Exactly. You're probably at the intersection of at least two mimetic tribes, if not more, which is why people don't talk about politics,
Yeah.
right? Because you got different tribes in the room.
Yeah.
And so, but if we're going to kind of, address polarization, or we got to do some mimetic mediation, right? Start at your Thanksgiving dinner table. Those are the tribes that you're connected to, at least,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some love there. There's probably some love between family members, and that's a real, that's not real to work with, love. So, that, I mean, I'm still speaking kind of in the abstract, like what would that even look like? Maybe I'll just make it a tiny bit more like, if we take an issue like abortion, which how would you do mimetic mediation between tribes on abortion? Well, it turns out that 62% of Americans, I think is the statistic I just read, 62% of Americans want sensible abortion rights. The majority of us.
Yep.
And so, but like, we're not going to, we're going to get legislation. We're getting legislation at the extremes. And the media narratives are also kind of pushed to the extremes because of social media and the economic and political context in which it exists, blah, 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 blah. Insert the conversation we've already had. But so how might we articulate the actual moral majority opinion on abortion that actually the majority of us share, right? That would require some mimetic mediation, let's
Yep.
say, or we could just call it integration of the steelman versions of the different perspectives. Some things cannot be integrated, right? Abortion under no circumstances cannot be integrated, but like no abortion under circumstances of when it's like already, X weeks, when it's already viable, and the woman's life is not threatened by the birth. Like, so there are ways to integrate this, like the steel man, let's say, that's mimetic mediation, I guess, in terms of um the into integrating the different perspectives. I'm trying to remember what my second like approach was to your question. Oh, the different tense. Okay,
Oh
so that,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I guess one is yeah, one approach might be, or one way to think about it might be how to, right, actually integrate the different perspectives.
Hmm.
Um, like on a another way to think about it, this is what I talked about with Jason and Ashley, is in terms of developing a strategy.
That was
If
my
you're
next
going to
thing. So
develop a
go
strategy,
in
yeah,
synthetic strategy, go
yeah,
riff,
synthetic strategy. So, and
do
I
it.
don't know, this is too nerdy for people, but
No, not at all.
um, yeah, the idea, it's very simple. The idea is, and the idea if you're trying to come up with a way of doing something, a strategy for something like leadership, or I mean, leadership was the example I started with them.
Yep.
And I can just give that example. And this is not from my work, this is from Daniel Goleman. But
Hmm.
he does this really brilliant thing where instead of being like, this is the definition of a good leader does this always and all the time, he asks, well, what he did was he interviewed many business leaders, and he identified 6 different leadership styles that all work well in different circumstances.
Hmm.
So, and you don't, it's like commanding works really well in a crisis, affiliative works really well when you need to repair bonds, visionary works really well when you need to mobilize some kind of a turnaround and, cohere around a new shared vision. So he has these different, but it's not just that. So that's already brilliant in and of itself. It's like, oh, wow, leadership looks different in different leadership is not the same thing all the time. It
Hmm.
depends, what circumstance are we in, what do we need, and therefore what kind of leadership do we need. But he takes the further brilliant step of what is that leadership style's impact on the overall organizational climate. Commanding sucks. It's no fun to be commanded. We don't like it. Visionary is really fun. We love that one. And so we use the ones that are not fun in order to get ourselves out of that situation so we can shift into the ones that feel better for everyone. Some are like emergency measures. So when you're thinking about something like growing food, it just helps right size. It's like, oh, I mean, this is from the conversation with Ashley and Jason, and I don't know enough about this, but let's just use this as an example. Oh, fake meat is
Yep.
kind of an emergency measure, right? It's like, maybe, I mean, this is the way that they, and again, I don't know if but let's just use this as an illustration. It's like that also helps us kind of think about where we want to put our resources. Like we want to put enough resources in the emergency measures so that we have them, but
Hmm.
but triage wise, we really want to invest in the ones that we want to use most of the time, because that's actually the circumstance we would rather be in. It's just a way to,
100%.
it's a way to, and then I think actually web or crypto is such like a perfect kind of application for this, because there's so much kind of like, it's right, it's wrong, it's good, it's bad. It's like, under what circumstances,
Yep.
if we just abstract from crypto and just think in terms of currency or methods of exchange. Oh,
Hmm.
there's so many tools we get to put on the table. We get to put fiat money, we get to put bartering, we get to put local currencies, we get to put time banks, we get to put crypto, we get to put like, I don't even know all of them. And then you can imagine a similar matrix to the one for leadership. Under what circumstances, if any,
Yep. Yep.
is this method of exchange or storing value most useful? And then we can start to develop as I would call it, synthetic strategy that integrates, right, and right sizes the different tools. And with crypto, I guess it's also worth saying we don't totally know yet. Like we're kind of still in a little bit of experimentation mode. So there's also a little bit of like, hold up the criticism. Let's try it out and see where it's useful. We don't totally know the answer to that question yet, so that we can incorporate it into the toolbox as it is useful.
That's great. Well
Yeah.
put, because I mean, honestly, you could kind of take that strategy, if you will, of, looking at things synthetically with almost any emerging technology, anything that's kind of coming up. And I guess that kind of pivots to my, one of my last questions is, so new media,
Yeah.
huge, interesting things. And with you being a producer, executive producer, I definitely didn't want to miss out on the question of kind of like, I know that you're kind of doing maybe some stuff, or your bio said that you're trying to do some new media with Center of Humane Technology. So, I mean, there's VR, there's AR, there's animation with DALL-E and Midjourney, there's Unreal Engine, there's all this kind of new stuff. So I guess can you thread the needle with like the power of narratives and storytelling, myth making, but then also kind of these new emerging storytelling, use cases or technology or et cetera? And maybe like, are there any future projects coming up or anything we should be on the lookout for? Or, I mean, we can keep it broad as well.
Well, now that you know that I'm in a semi-permanent state of creative anguish, there's always, I mean, that's like the nicest question you can ask me is like, what idea are you obsessing about right now? So that I can, so
Good.
you can just talk about it and it can give you a little bit of relief. In terms of the new tools, though, I mean, something like GPT-3.
Yeah.
Are you familiar? Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
GPT-3 is you can now just say, describe what you want, and the AI will make it. So make me a conversation between Nicholas and Stephanie talking about a conversation between Nicholas and Stephanie. Oh, I mean, whatever. You can just like,
Beautiful.
you can tell the thing to make it. And I mean, we are now at the point of Genesis, and God said, it's like, and we said, and the thing exists. So it's really wild. But where you can go with that where my mind goes with that is like, I want to be a fully cyborg operation where if I'm making a series, like Deep Reckonings is a series, and I could theoretically just tell GPT-3, make me the Steelman version of a conversation between Putin and Jesus.
Oh,
Take
wow.
everything Putin has said, take everything Jesus has said, and just give me the Steelman reckoning. The Steelman, and it can make it. That's what's so wild. And I can also say, look back at the ones that I have made for reference,
Oh, yeah,
just
sure, sure.
include that in your data set and
Yeah, yeah.
include the entire catalog of reckonings while you're at it too.
Do it.
So you just feed it the data. Yeah. So it just becomes, especially as a tortured artist, I can scale more easily with some cyborgs on my team
That's
or,
good.
some robots on my team. But in terms of um, like a specific something next, I'm thinking about what I want to say. There's so many things I could say. I'll just say one that I haven't
Okay.
really talked about. This is very simple. But I'll say a simple one and then a not simple one. The simple
Okay.
one is so just take take all the chiefs of all the tribes.
Okay.
So take Trump, AOC, Jordan Peterson, just take the chiefs of the different mimetic tribes.
Okay.
And you have a short video, you have a clip of them saying their shtick, whatever their
Mm-hmm.
shtick is, stop steal, Green New Deal, whatever their shtick is.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you deep fake them saying the opposite thing.
Oh,
And then you
okay.
just string them all together and you just release it. And it just thoroughly confuses us. It's like, no, wait, I agree. Oh no, wait, now I don't agree. And the title is "The Messenger is the Message."
Oh,
It's
okay.
just a
Okay.
holding of the mirror to the extent to which what we believe, what we agree with is informed by who says it. And now that my person said the opposite thing, now I want to believe that too, but now I'm confused. Wait, that maybe I just believe everything all at the same time for
Oh,
one
that's
moment,
yeah, 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 yeah.
for one moment of confusion. Um,
Would that be a cool
that,
example and exercise? I'm fully aboard on that.
that's very simple. Okay, the most ambitious is I would love to land a UFO at COP27.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that would be very helpful.
Okay.
I think it'd be
Okay.
very helpful to get Hollywood on board and just like do it so well. High
Like,
fidelity.
would this be like War of the Worlds type of thing? Like everything goes out on like an
It'd
embargo at
be
a
like the
certain
overview
time?
effect. It'd
Oh,
be like the
okay. Okay.
overview. Yeah, it's like
Okay.
what happens to us when suddenly there's like a whole nother team and
Oh,
suddenly we're like on Team Human. Team
ooh.
Human is where it's and not that we're like fighting with the other team, but
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
you're not humans or you're not Earth life. We are Team Earth life.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
hell yeah,
Yeah.
which is what COP27 kind of needs is like Team Earth life. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess
Yeah.
then this will be a perfect kind of segue or transition into my last question that and as a lot of people know, like I always ask people, if you were kind of experiencing what the astronauts at the ISS or you're on the moon looking at Earth, I mean, you really see Earth in its glory and in its ultimate whatever you want to call it, like its religious mythological thing of being Gaia. It's just a planet, with like a thin atmosphere. It's in, the deepness of black space, and there's boundaries geographically, but there's no borders, and a very, very thin atmosphere. So if you have something to say, I mean, we can, I guess, segue transition from a COP27 future ultimate, thing, but like what would also, in Stephanie's mind or thoughts, like, it could be a line of poetry, it could be a full, address to the human nation, it could be a meme. So what are some things that, if you were experiencing the overview effect, what would you want to kind of put forth?
I think I would just cry. I
Okay.
think I would just start crying. I don't know if that wouldn't be like the thing that I would have planned to say, but if I'm like imagining myself
Mm-hmm.
looking at the earth from space like that, and how truly you just said, yeah, our atmosphere really is so thin and it's so precious.
Yeah.
Oh my God, and what are we doing? And what beauty and what a miracle that this ever even happened to begin with. I think I would just cry.
Hey.
I don't know that that would be very helpful for people.
Well, I
Um,
guess maybe then take a thing out of the doomer optimism hat, and like, are there
ah,
specific things, or I mean, you don't have to go to projects or
oh,
ways of thinking,
cry,
but
but cry. It would be crying, not just how sad. It would be crying also just what a miracle. So
beauty,
yeah,
etc. Okay, okay.
crying. But okay, but you were gonna say if I'm taking something out of the doomer optimism hat.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, like, what are some optimistic kind of things,
Oh,
maybe to,
okay.
just something
Um,
to transfix to the world population after the cries of beauty, of sadness, of, etc.
um,
Sadness. I mean, crying. We could also just say crying.
crying tears of wonder and joy and awe. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Wow. Just
We can
wow.
leave it at that. We can
Or
honestly leave it
maybe
at
I'd
that.
start singing. Maybe I would sing We Are the World.
Wow, going old school, back to the We
Yeah,
Are the
yeah,
World.
yeah. Back
Okay,
to Stevie Wonder, Cyndi Lauper.
it's
I don't
great.
know if all the lyrics really apply, but We Are the World, just
Yeah,
the
yeah.
just the chorus.
Well,
Um,
I'll have your rendition of Imagine over, the panoply
oh.
of the stars that did that at the beginning of the pandemic, So,
Um, yeah, or I don't know, maybe I mean, I think the thing is to have everyone have that experience, right?
oh,
So
totally. That's my
what like
big mission,
the the transmission is like, you guys really need to do this. I don't know. You guys really need to check this out.
Right, right,
Check,
right.
yeah,
Cool. Well,
which yeah.
okay. So we have tears of many emotions. Check this out. Singing. I mean, those are all great, great things. I guess as lastly, then,
What would be your answer to that question?
I mean, yeah, I mean, for me, as of now, I'm still trying to think about it. My big kind
Yeah.
of like, uh, I guess you could say moonshot goal is to kind of create on the moon these kind of interdisciplinary like research bases like we have in Antarctica, where you have the best and brightest minds from all over the world like doing kind of cutting edge stuff. But then as well, I want to not just kind of have it as scientific and be like a cultural hub, these like kind of
Mm,
how to see, like Jason's huge into bioregionalism and stuff, and I'm a huge fan of
yeah.
that, of like watershed, where do you get your water, where do you get your air,
Yeah.
how things connect like that. And I think one of the biggest things is, and I imagine, I mean, again, like this is me just, but like, what if, you could take a field trip to the moon, you know what I mean? Or something like as a part of like
Yeah.
class of culture, of like religious, of all kinds of different meaning makings, to really see the earth as for what it is, because I think we lose so much of that and are fallible to like our senses and how you can look to the
Yeah.
horizon and it's flat, but it's not, we're on a ball that's spinning around in space,
Yeah.
around a star in a, all these other
How
things.
far
So
out does Google Maps go? Does it go? I mean, does it
I
go to
don't know.
space?
I mean, maybe I think there's some mapping stuff I'm assuming from NASA that you
I
can
mean, it
check out from the
should.
moon or
Maybe it
Mars.
does, and I just don't know. It should. It easily could,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Just like sync it to satellite, like so you can zoom out all the way. And maybe that zoom should always be like in the window.
Oh,
It's
right.
just like, and remember, wherever you are, you're still on
You're
planet
still
Earth.
here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of
Still
the
here.
whole thing of the pale blue dot, Carl Sagan, et
Yeah.
cetera. Like that's really the basis of all that. So I mean, I don't know what my answer. That you're the first person to ask me like point blankly what mine would be. So I mean, I guess maybe a poem or again like awe, like the
Yeah.
creation of things. Like I think that would be my biggest go-tos. But I guess my real answer is it's a work in progress. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Likewise.
So
That's a really good, yeah, I'm going to keep thinking about it too. Maybe we can reconvene in like 20 years. We have
we
more
can.
wisdom under our belts and yeah, share the answers as they've evolved. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're getting close to time. So is there any other, things you want to maybe say or parting thoughts or anything that you maybe don't have to get to overview effects kind of level? If not, then it's all good. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this has been really fun. I thank you for asking such open-ended questions and also like clearly kind of like digging around so that you could ask deeper questions. That's
For sure.
always really nice. Um, I guess I would also just say that if people want to be in touch, I'm pretty active on Twitter.
Exactly.
You can find me at Steph Lepp, and I am also it's kind of like active on Twitter while trying to kind of um, discern how to use Twitter in a thoughtful way. There's kind
Sure.
of the like using it
Yeah.
while being kind of like critical of it and exploring how it can be like it's like I joke that I'm trying to build a propaganda machine to inoculate people from future propaganda. I do think there are ways that the tools can be used in a way that also yeah, in a way that also expands the possibility space of the tools or like uh
Inverts them.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly some STS concepts I could bring in here, but like, yeah, use the affordances still in creative ways.
Awesome. Well said.
Yeah,
Well said. Cool.
yeah.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up. It's been great talking with you. So thanks for coming on Conversations, Stephanie. And until next time, ad Astra.